Awesome. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're having an absolutely phenomenal Tuesday. I know we went through a lot of information yesterday on database, and today, I know Tuesdays are generally our market update days. And just by kind of scanning, those of you that are on, last week, Gary Keller did his market update. And when Gary does his market update, what he's really looking at is not necessarily just at a week by week basis, but what is the impact that we're seeing across the board of factors like one, the pandemic, right? The pandemic, the economic conditions, the GDP, inflation, home sales. What does that look like right now? What's the immediate impact that things like unemployment have on our market? And then what is that recovery window going to look like, right? And that's what I really wanted to make sure that I shared with you guys today. So I'm going to be sharing my screen, and we're going to be looping in. Give me one sec while I go ahead and pop that open. Okay, awesome. Can you guys see that screen that says market update? Can I get a thumbs up? Perfect. Awesome. So we're going to go through his market update, and I'm going to say this a couple times on the call. But as we go through this, I'm going to give you guys a very, clinical analysis. We're going to look at the numbers and we're going to talk about the numbers. But I don't want to take away from the fact that this is something that is happening in people's lives right now. Right? This is something that people are dealing with right now. And so a lot of the things that we're going to be looking at, they are 100%, impacting actual human lives. And I don't want to take away from that. I think that's why it's so important that we go over this, because it's a reminder that we as agents, right, part of our fiduciary duty to our clients is to be there to educate and to support them, especially as they face these things that may impact them in the market. Fair? All right. So let's look at COVID-19. Now, the reason that we're looking at COVID-19 is kind of this first piece is that COVID-19 is kind of the backdrop. The pandemic is kind of the backdrop of what's going on from an economic perspective. So we've seen that this has kind of continued to increase. It's steadied out for a little bit, and then it kind of popped up over here in July.
Hey, Monica, we can't hear anything.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for coming off mute, for letting me know. I've been talking for a couple seconds there. Okay, so let me go back right over here. COVID-19 is really the backdrop of what's happening from an economic standpoint, right? It's what's impacting and affecting everything else. Now, as a country, we've gone through multiple different pandemics before, one of those being the Spanish flu in 1918. Right? There was the flu pandemic in the summer of 1957. There was actually about 70 to 120,000 cases throughout those months, and yet there was a vaccine by October. Now, we also saw increase in unemployment at that time. The unemployment went from 4.5% to 7%. And although there was a vaccine by October of that year, so I want to put this in perspective, right? There was a flu pandemic, summer of 57. Unemployment increased to 7%. There was a vaccine by October, right? So summer to October. And yet the economy and the unemployment rate took until 1959 to recover. So I just want to give us some context as we look at this, right? And as we look at the unemployment rates. So I want you to understand that the national historic average for unemployment is 5%, right? The national historical average is 5%. If we look at monthly unemployment here in 2020, and we compare that to the Great Recession, right, we can see our unemployment rate has not only, it dipped up to 14.7% in March. That was directly following that quarantine period. And then we saw an additional, it's recovered a little bit, but we're still at about 8.4%, right? 8.4% unemployment, whereas national historical average has been around 5%. This is also, if you look at this time span here, when we're looking at that 07 to 2012, this is a couple years time, right? 2007 to 2009 to get to 10%, 2009 to 2013 to get down to 7.5%. Whereas in reality, what happened this time around, specifically because of the pandemic, right? It propelled us into this extreme increase in unemployment very, very quickly. And so these are all very important factors that we're going to take a look at. Now, no, when we look at this case here for the Great Recession, we see May 2013 was at 7.5%. It took until 2016, right? It wasn't until 2016 that we were back down to the historical average of 5%. So I just want to give us some clarity as we're looking at this, right, is how have past recessions impacted us, and what are some of the implications as we look at what's going on now. Now, I'll note, the pandemic kind of artificially propels this, so we likely won't know until probably about the end of the year what our true unemployment number is, right? So I just want us to keep that in mind as we're tracking this. Now, let's look at earnings. And this is going to be really interesting as well, because when we start looking at what's happening from an unemployment perspective, unemployment is going to be these purple bars here. And these turquoise bars are going to be the weekly earnings that persons within these different industries earn. We can see that it's not the same across the board. So while we're looking at this 8.4%, unemployment rate right now, it's not necessarily the same impacts for everyone. In fact, leisure and hospitality. So leisure, hospitality, what does that entail? That is our waiters, waitresses, right? Those that have the lowest earning potential, so $439 on a weekly basis, right, are astronomically impacted, as is transportation, right? As is transportation. We're seeing the highest rate of unemployment and if you look at the top three, so 21.3% leisure and hospitality, 13% here in transportation and warehousing, 8.8% here in retail trade. We're seeing some of the highest unemployment rates on those that earn the least within our country. So I just want to point that out as well. Now, if we look at the far left over here, this is what essentially applies to our industry, right? This is what applies to the real estate industry, financial activities, and professional and business services. In fact, take a look at these here. These are the top 5 paid, the top highest paid sectors, right, of industry. And they are actually, when we look at the unemployment rate, if you were to average it out between the top 5, we're still only slightly above the national average of 5%. So in reality, those that are the highest earning within our world, our country right now, are those that are experiencing the least unemployment. Now, let's talk about why we're still seeing a boom in housing, right? I think that's the other piece that's going to be really important as well. So take a look at this. This is going to be unemployment and housing, right, by age. So if we see this sector here, 35 plus, those that are 35 plus make up 72% of the annual home purchases, right? Those that are 35 plus. Those that are 35 plus also tend to have careers in our higher paid sectors. They're experiencing the lowest unemployment rate as of August of 6.8%, right? Of 6.8%. This median group, 25 to 34, is experiencing unemployment about 9.7. And this 24 and younger, most of who tend to work in leisure and hospitality and retail, two of the higher impact sectors, are making up more of that higher unemployment rate. So when we look at this group that is making the majority of purchases has the least impact, which is why housing experienced such a rebound, right? That's just really important for us to understand as we're looking at why do we have so many buyers out on the market right now, and why are we seeing so many, the pre-approval rating go up so much. The other factor that we need to look at is the GDP, right? The GDP. Now, I'm going to note, again, I said it at the beginning, I'm going to say it again. When we're talking about unemployment, when we're talking about these numbers, it's important to realize that this is people's lives we're talking about, right? So while we're giving an analysis of the data because it's important for you to understand it, this is meant to inform you, and it's meant to give you a little bit more insight into what's going on. And yet it's also just really important that we have this understanding that this is what people are going through right now. And so we want to be sensitive to that fact as well. Now, when we look at the GDP, I'm going to note this, so we were at 2.6, 2.4 in 2019. In Q1 of 2020, it dropped 5%. In Q2 of 2020, we saw a drop of 31.7. This is the speed at which the GDP dropped has never happened before in the history of tracking this information. So I want you guys to have an understanding of that, right? When we start looking at the national, right, let's look at this here. So I want you guys to look at, this is going from 89 to 2020. When we talk about a recession, so the definition of a recession is that the GDP has dropped, that there's been 2 quarters in a row, right? 2 quarters in a row of drop. Now, when we talk about the last recession, you can see here that as we talk about it, a lot of people assumed, hey, it was 2007, right? It was 2007, and then the following years where we experienced a recession. Everybody talks about the market crash of 07, 08, right? The housing crash of 07, 08. In reality, though, if you look at the numbers here, we see a drip here to 3.3 and then 2.7, where we really saw the drop was in 2005, right? It was in 2005 that we saw that recession start. The reason that I want to point that out is because when we look at what's happening right now, we're seeing a little bit of a boom in certain sectors and certain industries as we are in housing. And like in 2005, where we saw kind of that writing on the wall, it lulled people almost into a false sense of security until the bottom really fell out in 07, 08, right? So I don't say this to scare anybody, right? Because it's more so that we have an understanding of what's going on, and that we look at the indicators of what's happening right now as an indication of hey, there's a greater impact here. So that's really what we want to look at. Now, as we see these increases here, anything between about 2 to 3 is solid, but it's not necessarily that big of a boom, right? It's not considered a boom. But we see here 2009 going into 2010, we saw a recovery period here. So I just want to point that out as well. Then we saw a little bit of a drop, and then we experienced some recovery as well. we look at over here, we actually saw some drops in 2019. The anticipation, so this 2020 is an estimate, but the estimate is that we will end the year at about a -6, right? A -6, which is, you know, it's not where we want to be for sure, right? But I just want to point that out here as well. The second piece we want to look at here is going to be the home sales. So this is where we're at right now. So we look at 2019 right here in the orange, and then we can see our 2020 numbers here in the purple. We saw a dip April, May, right? We saw it start to go back up in June and again in July. So it's really interesting that we've seen this kind of recovery very quickly in the home sales, but that's why we look at what's going on from an unemployment perspective, right? That's why that's important, is that we understand that the majority of those that are actually making these purchases exist in two categories: the above 35 age range, right? The above 35 age range that are experiencing the lowest unemployment, but also in those top 5 sectors of industry that are also experiencing that lowest unemployment. So it's important for us to understand that. The second part here is home price. So we're seeing inventory down across the board. Inventory being down, coupled with the fact that we still have these home buyers in the market, is causing prices to go up across the board. So we saw a small dip across the board in May, and we saw that recover in June and then rise in July, right? As well as interest rates continuing to go down. We started at about a 3.62 national average, and we've been about a little bit above a 3 as we entered in July. In some areas, we saw some dip a little bit below a 2. So it's just within the 2s, right? So it's just important for us to take a look at this as well, because these are the factors that are contributing to that boom, right? These are the different factors that are contributing to that boom in the market. When we look at month supply of inventory, we also have had very limited inventory. May was the only time that it went up just a little bit, right? That it went up just a little bit. Now, no, this is, again, we're looking at a national average. We've been tracking this as we've been going through it, you know, as well. And we have not gone really above that 4-month supply of inventory, right? We haven't really gone above that 4-month supply of inventory at all. And that's part of the reason that we're seeing this competitiveness within the market. So let's look at local market conditions. And these are going to be some of the top markets that we're looking at to see sales, price, and inventory. So we can see sales were down here. We're going to look at Los Angeles specifically, right? We can see the sales were down, price is up, and inventory is also down, right? Inventory is also down. So we'll see how much this recovers. Part of it is that, you know, we're experiencing a market where you have some individuals that are not wanting to list their home because they're not sure that they're going to be able to find something else, right? So we're seeing that as well. But let's talk about what's next. Before I kind of jump into this, what's next, are there any questions on this? Let me see, where did my chat box go? Uh-oh, guys, I'm losing my chat box. No, okay. So I'm going to jump into the what's next. I think that this is important as we look at this. So all of these things play a role into what's happening at a national level, but also a local level. These numbers are specifically what we've been looking at the national level, and yet we're seeing a really great impact of this within our local market. When we start looking at what's next, we need to talk about what does recovery look like for the housing market, right? What does recovery look like for the housing market? Now, when Gary talked about this, and I'm going to note, this is information that has actually been researched. And when it was presented to Gary, they presented a couple different options. They said, hey, Gary, this is what we think is going to happen. There's two potentials that we're looking at. And as Gary and Jay Papazan looked at the information, they said, you know what? No, we think it's going to be a two-stage recovery. And so that's going to be what we're looking at, right? Is we're looking at the housing market in kind of this K-shaped recovery. You guys have heard me talk on these calls about almost having a tale of two markets, right? And that's why these numbers and what we're looking at is important, is because we're seeing that sector of people that are getting into the market, that are purchasing homes right now, that are experiencing that low unemployment, that are able to purchase. That's the owner-occupied market. That's one market that we're seeing, but we're also seeing that lower income person, right? Those that are in leisure, those that are in the retail space, those that are in transportation, they are experiencing the highest rate of unemployment. And the reason I point that out is because those are going to be our renters. So I want you to keep that in mind, right? So let's look at stage one recovery. The owner-occupied market. So we still have low interest rates. The incomes for earners in these areas are stable, right? The unemployment rate is only slightly above the national average of 5% in the top earning employment sectors, right? So we know that in this particular market, owner-occupied, we're going to continue to see strong demand, right? We're going to continue to see strong demand. The sales might be limited because of one thing: limited inventory, right? We continue to see limited inventory. We're going to continue to see that be an issue. So it's potentially going to continue to drive up our price points, right? To drive up our price points. Now, the second part is the investment market, So what did I say? I said those that are in leisure, retail, and in transportation are seeing the highest rate of unemployment. Those that are below 35 years of age are seeing the highest rate of unemployment, right? The sector that makes up the least amount of home purchasing, but they make up the greatest segment of what? Of renters, right? Of renters. We just saw a mortgage moratorium that was extended here in California, right? We talked about that within the last couple of weeks. And what we're finding is that renters right now, they can pay essentially what, 25% of the rent, file a form, and not be evicted, right? They're protected by the eviction moratorium. Now, the burden of then collecting that rent later is going on who? Is going on the landlord. And the majority of those landlords will go to small claims court. Now, we know that small claims court has a maximum claim value of $10,000. So it's going to be interesting, because especially as we look at those that are in that investment market, are mom and pop owners, those that don't necessarily have a really big portfolio. If the renters are struggling and missing rent, now all of a sudden you have landlords that are not able to make their own mortgage payments, right? This could push rents down in some cases. That loss of cash flow, we may see more rental properties, multifamily properties, single family resident properties that are as rentals going up for sale, right? And we're seeing, and I am seeing this right now, especially as I talk with you guys, is some of these different rental properties are shifting from income properties, right? And they're being purchased by those that intend to be owner occupied. So we're seeing single family residences that are part of an investment portfolio that are going on the market, and they're being purchased by owners that are intending to owner occupy. So that's going to be one of the interesting markets that we see, is people kind of getting rid of that those supplemental investments if they're not able to make their mortgage payments. The second part of this is institutional investors may move in and concentrate on the rental market further. We talked about that 2 weeks ago, right? If you guys remember, I mentioned a major investment company that is getting back in the market, right? That came out during that last kind of economic recession, right? And got into the rental market. So we're going to keep an eye on that piece as well, right? Now, so what does this look like? So it's the employment income factor here, right? The indirectly impacted industries. And then we have those over time, the directly impacted industries. So this is kind of just what that looks like. Now let's look at stage two, right? Stage two. And then I'm going to talk about what can change this, right? Because we know that whenever we make predictions, we don't have a crystal ball. We're looking at the indicators, right? We're looking at the indicators, but we know those can be affected as things change. So stage 2, housing markets in a little bit more of a traditional recovery. We are likely going to see a negative impact on other parts of the economy, and recovery will be slow. So the pandemic is very unique, right? The pandemic pushed us into unemployment very, very quickly, where we're still waiting to see what is the year going to end at from an unemployment rate. Like, where is that national average going to be? It's also changing, right? It also changes every single day. So recovery, as we kind of wait out what's going on, it's slow. It impacts, it's impacting consumer spending, which causes unemployment to rise in industries that are currently doing better than average. If we get another wave or a surge, right? If we get another wave or a surge, will that impact the economy again? Yes, right? So those are things that we take a look at and that we want to keep in mind. Number 2, demands for purchasing homes. It can slow if the demographic groups that are typically typical of homeownership are negatively impacted. So here's the piece. What did we say? 35 plus, people that are ages 35 plus tend to make up 72% of homeowners, of those that are purchasing, right? Of those that are out there purchasing homes. So we need to keep that in mind, is if we start seeing other industries or those 5 highest earning industries become impacted by what's going on in the economy, then we'll see that purchasing power slow down, right? We're gonna see that slow down. So we just wanna keep an eye on that as well. However, prices, on the other hand, prices are likely to continue to grow a little bit because of what? Low mortgage rates and low inventory. If we don't see more inventory coming onto the market, then we're not going to see prices slow down, right? Now, here's that last part. The demand will begin to recover as unemployment recovers. But here's the thing. What does this mean? That means we still need a vaccine, right? Because again, the pandemic is the backdrop of what's going on in the economy. What could go wrong? So there's going to be 2 more pieces that we're going to review really quickly. Forbearances. We've been talking about forbearances, right? The mortgage forbearances. Now, the way the mortgage forbearance works, it gives a maximum period of 12 months. So the forbearances is assuming 12 months. Now, let's note, the market changed in what? March. We went into a pandemic in March. So we have essentially a 12-month period. We are now in September, right? We are now in September. The assumption that this forbearance system works under is that borrowers will regain employment and will be in a position to restructure or modify their loans, right? Within that 12-month period. Now, here's the thing. It doesn't seem like we're much closer to finding a vaccine. The goal was originally they were talking about summer, right? They were talking about summer. This kind of staged recovery that our economy, even locally here in California, is going through, it's still a rollout plan, right? It's still a rollout plan. We will see certain industries that are forever impacted. We've seen businesses close down, right? We've seen a lot of different things that are going on. So if we get to Q2 of 2021 and the number of loans in forbearance stay high, that's where we're going to see the negative consequences. That's why when we've been talking about what's going on in the forbearance market, it's extremely important for us as agents to get ahead of that conversation, right? To get ahead of that conversation, to be having those conversations with the homeowners that we have relationships with right now, right? We need to be having those conversations right now, because what we're seeing is as we get closer to Q2 of next year, we're going to see people realize that, hey, I can't restructure my loan. I haven't gotten reemployed, right? Or maybe I have, but at a limited hours, limited income, right? And now I'm in a position where I need to sell. We could also see foreclosures increase. So this is what we're looking at as we go into 2021, that we're going to keep an eye on, but this is why having those conversations around forbearances is going to be so important. Here's just quickly looking at the loan delinquency rate. This is just looking at Freddie Mac, right? This is just looking at Freddie Mac, but looking at that 90-day delinquency rate, where it was in January to where it was as we entered July, right? Where it was as we entered July. Now, what could change things, right? Right now, we're looking at the factors as they exist, but we know that should something change as it relates to the pandemic, then that could affect some of these predictions. So a couple things, something that makes things closer to normal before we get a vaccine, in-home rapid testing, right? In-home rapid testing, that's something that is currently being discussed. It's being evaluated. Whether or not we see that come to fruition is still up in the air. Widespread organized contact tracing. So we're seeing that occurring, you know, even within our local. We know for us here in California, and especially in Los Angeles, we see like our Los Angeles County of Public Health is who deals with contact tracing. More improved treatment protocols or anything else that would give people confidence to kind of avoid infection in public spaces. That could make things progress to normal faster than expected. Now, I'll note those are things that are kind of they're a hope, but there's not anything really that has kind of said, hey, this is something that's coming or this is something that's happened. So we'll keep an eye on that. The second piece is getting a vaccine sooner than expected, right? Once we get a vaccine, businesses will be able to start to rehire. There'll be more people active in public spaces. Now, is that going to happen? I don't have a crystal ball to tell you that, right? There's no way to truly have an understanding of whether that's going to happen any sooner or whether that's a possibility. So what does that mean? And I'm going to stop sharing for a second because I want to come on and be able to see you guys. What does that mean? And I'm going to note, again, this is people's lives we're talking about, right? This is, and it may be you. It may be somebody in your family, right? That's being impacted in this way. It might be your clients that are experiencing those rates of unemployment, that are experiencing kind of, you know, the fear around it. So I don't want to take away from that. I think that's really important that we think about as we look at these numbers, is that, you know, it's really easy to look at numbers on a screen or look at the data and not and talk about the insights and the implications, and then not realize that this is real life, right, that we're experiencing right now. So I think that that's important. The reason this information is important, and what does this mean for your clients, right? For those of you that are working with clients that are in that above 35 range, that are in those highly employed, you know, those high employment sectors, those are the ones that are buying right now, right? Those are the ones that are buying. And we're still seeing competition because we have major issues as it relates to inventory, right? As it relates to inventory. We get that part, right? We get that part. We get that we need to make sure that we increase our skill set at getting our offers accepted, at negotiation, right? At those pieces. The piece that I really want us to take a look at and to think about is the sector of the population that falls in that other category, right? That as we enter 2021, as we get, you know, to these final months of the year, I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. We have to get in front of the conversation with the homeowners in our world, right? With those that are impacted by what's happening, right? That those that are impacted by unemployment, those that are impacted by forbearances, we need to get ahead of that conversation, right? We have to get ahead of that conversation. We need to be talking to our clients about this, right? We need them to understand that, hey, yeah, maybe you got a forbearance back in March, in April, in May, whatever that is, but that assumes 12 months. That assumes 12 months. And as we progress through the year and we get closer to kind of that deadline, are they going to be in a position to restructure? Are they going to be in a position to make up those lost payments? Or are they going to be in a position where it's in their best interest to sell, right? To protect their credit, to not have a foreclosure on their record, because that's where you come in, right? It's not about selling, right? It's not about selling. It's about solving a problem. It's about solving a problem. And I want to make that very, very clear as we talk about this, is that, you know, as realtors, our fiduciary duty to our clients, it's to solve their problems as it relates to homeownership, right? It might be to help them build equity. It might be to help them protect their equity, but sometimes it's to help them protect their financial reputation, right? Sometimes it's to help them protect their financial reputation. We have to have an understanding of what's happening so that we can understand what's coming, right? The news says a lot of stuff, right? The news says a lot, but we also need to look at what happened historically, right? What happened historically. We saw when we said recession and everybody said 2007, in reality, the recession started in 2005, right? In reality, it started in 2005. The numbers showcase that. And yet that wasn't something that's been taken into consideration. That's not how we remember it, right? That's not how we remember it. That's not how we think about it. And that's why it's important that we start those conversations right now, that we get in front of it right now, right? That we help our clients and we have these conversations with them right now, right? So it's important. I'm going to be posting these slides for you guys so you can take a look at as well. So the actual, when Gary went through it, right, they did about 90 minutes on it. I'm going to make sure as soon as that video is live, we can play it here in the Market Center, and I'll play it as well, because I think that this information, it's really hard to listen to it once and have a complete and complex understanding of it. Right? It's one of those things where we kind of need to look at it again. We want to have a clear understanding of what's going on within the market. It's why we go through a weekly market update, right? It's why, because it changes. Every week it changes. If we got a vaccine tomorrow, half of the things that I just said would change, right? If all of a sudden the governor opened up more of California and more people were able to go back to work, might some of these predictions change? Absolutely. That's why we review this information and why we talk about a weekly market update on a weekly basis, right? On a weekly basis. The second reason this is important is because I want you to understand that we work in an industry. We work in an industry that when we partner with the problem, and we become a solution, right? We become a solution, we make money. That's our job, right? That's our job, is we solve a problem, we help people, we change their lives. We change lives. And sometimes we do that by helping people become homeowners. Sometimes we do that by helping them protect their equity. But when we're in a market like the one that we're in right now, right? When we're in a market like the one we're in right now, we make more money the more problems we solve. We make more money the more problems we solve. So I want you to look at this as well as being an opportunity, right? As being an opportunity for you. This is, it can be a little scary, and I understand that, right? I think that we get a lot of emotions and stuff that go on, and everybody's facing different things in their lives. And it's important that we look at how we can help our clients, how we can help make this situation better for them. And how we can help those people. So that's it for today, right? A lot of information. I definitely, if you guys have questions and stuff, this whole week, right, on our calls, I'm going to be talking about mega camp stuff, things that we talked about at mega camp. Now that we understand what's going on with the market, how do we go implement this in our business, right? How do we take this information and implement it and impact our clients? We'll be revisiting the forbearance scripts, right? Those are really important. We're going to revisit some of those conversations and some of the ways to have this communication with your clients. Just remember, 2 markets out there, right? 2 markets out there. There are 35 plus age range that are out there buying up a storm. And then the other segment of the market, which is now impacting that investment market as well. So major opportunity that exist out there. But with that, you guys, I hope you have an absolutely phenomenal day. Go out and make it a great day. And don't forget, yesterday I gave you guys homework about your 8x8, right? Don't forget. So make sure you guys work on that piece as well. Have an amazing day, you guys. I'll talk to you soon. Bye. I see the waves. Bye, guys.